Our first pick in the top lane is Wukong. If you didn't see this coming, you've either been banning it already so you don't have to see what he's capable of, or you've been lucky enough to just not encounter it. Either way, Wukong is an absolute monster right now. The shift of power from an AD on his Q to AP has made his laning phase absurdly strong, and his clone being able to actually help more in a fight only accentuates that. His E is the same gap closing attack speed steroid it's always been, but the biggest change for Wukong is the fact that he can ult twice now for some reason, which, as you can imagine, is a pretty big deal. All in all, Wukong is just overloaded and it's silly to not cash in. Rush Tiamat for some extra wave clear, and then take Ignite so you can establish dominance. You don't need to TP to objectives when you're the scariest objective on the map at any given time. Fiora is our second pick for top lane right now. With the recent buffs to Ravenous Hydra a few patches back and Death's Dance getting changed to make its users more durable, Fiora is killing it in top lane right now. If your knowledge of matchups isn't good, Fiora can outplay most opponents outside of a few hard counters, and even then, it can be close. Her Q's mobility lets her simultaneously dodge key skill shots and damage the enemy, and her W negates even more crucial enemy damage. Use these abilities to nullify whatever your lane opponent needs most, and you'll find yourself becoming an unkillable split pusher. Jack fills a similar niche here, so we're giving him a quick shout out since he's also worth picking up as an alternative to Fiora. It's just that the Ravenous Hydra buffs have been extra kind to her. Just like on Summoner's Rift, you're seeing two of Wukong on this list. He's our #1 pick for the jungle for the same reasons he's our #1 pick in the top lane. He's just that busted. He has the highest win rate in top, jungle, and mid right now, so he's an excellent flex pick at the moment. When Riot announced they'd be reworking Wukong, they stated that their goal was to keep both lane Wukong and jungle Wukong intact, and at least for now, that's held up. His jungle clear is relatively fast and healthy, and at that point it's all about ganks, which Wukong does just as obnoxiously well as everything else. The only difference in your rune setup for jungle Wukong is that you're taking Relentless Hunter instead of Ravenous Hunter, simply because you want the move speed to help with ganks and chasing people down. Like I said, he's at least a triple threat, so make sure he's on your team or not in the game at all. Speaking of flex picks, Echo is our next pick for the jungle. Echo's been pretty strong for a while now in both jungle and mid, but he's a bit more popular as a jungler. He doesn't have the fastest clear in the world, but if your kiting camps out properly, you'll stay fairly healthy. His Q works well with Hunter's Talisman to keep him sustained, along with his W shield and AoE stun. His E offers him enough mobility to cross certain walls and dodge skill shots, and his ult zips him back to where he was a few seconds ago with a bit more health restored. Most importantly though, Echo is strong at just about every stage of the game. He's not as strong in early skirmishes as something like Olaf or Xin Zhao, but he can hold his own, and thanks to Dark Harvest, he's one of the few options for jungle players that want the potential to be late game carries. Plus, he's not just strong, he's fun too. Fiddlesticks has arrived on the Rift, and so too has he arrived on our list. This absolute terror is looking all set to ravage the jungle and our sanity alike. His new AoE drain makes his clear faster and healthier than ever, and his passive scarecrows can help him defend his jungle from the strong early duelists that counter him. As far as ganks go, his ult is still his best ganking tool, of course, but with Electrocute and Runic Echoes, his burst damage alone is worth a jump scare, even if you do just have to walk into lane. The Fiddlesticks rework has shored up a lot of his former weaknesses, so it's definitely worth it to put some time into Fiddlesticks and learning how things have been changed around. Kassadin is our first mid lane pick for patch 10.7, and boy is he a sight to behold. Kael's rework aimed to make her league's premier scaling champion, but I'll tell you right now that Kassadin was the OG level 16 pop-off champion, and Kael did not dethrone him. Most champions that scale that well are supposed to have a pretty weak laning phase, and Kassadin's isn't phenomenal, but it's not awful. Your Q lets you trade well against AP champions since you can simultaneously shield yourself from damage and send a little damage of your own back their way. His W helps him wave clear, so pushing him in only does but so much, and his E is an auto attack reset that helps him CS under tower early on. Once he hits 6, his ult's mobility makes him a huge chore to gank, but once he hits 16, he becomes a huge chore to be on the same screen as. He just does so much damage when his ult is stacked up, and he's so mobile. Pair Kassadin with a Yuumi that knows what they're doing, and he's basically unkillable after level 16. Save yourself the LP and the headache, play it or ban it. Tired of seeing Diana? Me too, but thanks to the recent phase rush buffs, she's even stronger in certain matchups where she can run it. It's not always optimal, but it gives her that little bit of extra stickiness to chase down targets. Not that most of them live longer than 2 seconds anyway. Her Q does a huge amount of burst damage, so does her ult, and her E's dash makes it so that her W's damage gets fully applied too. She's an oppressive OP assassin, and right now, she's one of the best picks in the game for making enemy carries disappear. In addition to offering so much damage, she's also a very accessible champion with a relatively low learning curve. Once you get accustomed to learning how to pilot a squishy melee champion, and I use the term squishy very loosely because she is remarkably hard to kill, you're all set. Vayne is our first pick for the bot lane. You probably don't need us to tell you that Vayne is a god tier late game ADC, but we're telling you anyway. Her W's 3-hit true damage makes her a threat to anyone and everyone regardless of how tanky they are, which is especially important when we're seeing so many tanks being played. Just like Kassadin, her laning phase really isn't that bad when you factor in the reward for surviving it, especially when Ezreal is such a popular pick right now, and he doesn't have the kit to punish her. Even against tougher matchups though, her Q helps her keep her distance, as does her E, and both can be used offensively for outplays, so she's pretty stacked. For Vayne, going even is basically winning lane, so if you can just duck and weave your way to mid game, you're generally good to go. On the opposite side of the marksman spectrum, Draven is pick number 2. For Draven, going even isn't winning lane is winning lane. He has the most damage and kill pressure of any marksman in the early game, and the recent buffs to his W's move speed have only exacerbated that. Aside from his move speed, his Q's spinning axes still chunk enemies, and his E is the same great peel and engage tool it's always been. Wrap it all up with a nice little global ult so your teammates can admire your skill no matter where they are, and you have one strong bot laner. Draven's very rarely on the forefront of ADC play, but right now, his ability to create leads and snowball them is super OP. But his learning curve is relatively high in the context of other marksmen, so put some practice in on him and start climbing. Misfortune is back again as pick number 3 in the bot lane. As much as we'd love to tell you about other champions, we'd be doing you a disservice if we didn't constantly remind you to get the freeload that MF offers. Her Q's bounce crit deals an ungodly amount of damage. Her W's move speed and attack speed steroid make her a roaming threat to be reckoned with, and the combination of her E and her ult give her some of the best zone control in the game. Never mind the fact that it only takes one well-placed ult to win a teamfight. She's OP. She's been OP for a few patches now. Play this OP champion or get it out of your games. It's way too easy for how rewarding it is. Nami is our first support pick for 10.7, and for good reason. Nami is a well-rounded jack-of-all-trades type champion, except she's busted, so she's more of a queen-of-all-trades type champion. Her Q's AoE stun is great CC to have in your arsenal, and the only thing that makes it balanced is that it's hard to hit on a target that isn't CC'd in some way. The good thing for her is that her E can slow enemies and CC them, which makes the Q much easier to land. Aside from that, her W does a pretty solid amount of damage and a pretty solid amount of healing, so if you can get those triple procs off with any consistency, you'll be dominating your laning phase, and thanks to your ult's lane-wide knockup, you'll probably be dominating teamfights as well. On the tankier side of supports, Naut is our second pick for this list. He's been in the meta for a while now, and despite a few soft nerfs to him, he's still firmly anchored at the top of the tier lists. It's hard to argue with a hook that's half as wide as the lane, and even harder to argue with a giant anchor rooting you in place every couple seconds. Not to mention the point-and-click knockup that also knocks up whoever is in its path to its target. Scary stuff. He's just so hard to kill and so versatile in terms of engaging and peeling, he needs a serious nerf for sure. But in the meantime, use him in your climb and get as much value out of him as you can. Yuumi is our final pick for this episode, and like Nami, she is a champion of many talents. She's got shields from her passive, good damage from her Q, way too much healing and mobility on her W, and of course her ult is phenomenal in teamfights. Yuumi is somewhat reliant on the performance of your teammates, since she has to tether herself to them, so she's best utilized with a duo. They don't necessarily have to be an ADC either, contrary to what your ADC will tell you. Yuumi is just as valuable on any late game hyper carry. Kassadin, Vladimir, and Master Yi are all horrific to deal with in general, but especially when they have a Yuumi attached to them. And that's it for our OP Picker Ban Patch 10.7 edition video. If you guys like this video, make sure that you subscribe, share, and click that like button. Also, share in the comments if you guys have any suggestions for us. We love learning from all of your comments. And if you want more content just like this, you can find it at proguides.com. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. We'll see you out on the Rift.